Hi guys, and welcome to the Ambitious Podcast. We're your hosts. I'm Liddy.
And I'm Hazal, and this is a space for the ambitious girlies chasing big dreams and building bold lives. Before we get started, can you guys actually imagine that I convinced Liddy to let us finally start a podcast? I'm so excited. This podcast has been something I've wanted to do for genuinely at least 2 to 3 years. So it's finally here.
And I'm happy for you. You fought tooth and nail for this.
I fought for it.
But let's dive into today's topic, which is going to be all about redefining success.
Yes, building the life you want to build versus the one everyone else is telling you to chase.
As high achievers, especially in more traditional careers like medicine, there's this sense that everything is kind of mapped out for you, but no one really asks you if you want that type of success or that version of success. And if we now consider this day and age where social media has added that extra level of what success looks like, we see things like luxury, hustle, travel, the newest cars, and all of these other things. But when it's not aligned or authentic to you, you end up building a life that you resent. And I think we've both had moments where we've had to stop and ask ourselves, is this really the life I want? So when we were growing up, what did success even look like for us? I know for me, for example, I was very much discouraged from going down routes that were considered less stable. So whether that's entrepreneurship or more creative options like music, content creation, even though funnily enough, the careers that were traditionally considered stable, depending on where you are in the world, we are seeing things like redundancies and, difficulties in the job market. So it's very interesting to kind of revisit that idea of going down a stable job option.
I completely agree. And I feel like growing up, my family were very fixated on, good grades and working hard at school. And that makes sense because I'm sure many of us can relate to, they didn't have the most educational opportunities when they were growing up. For example, they couldn't do A levels, they couldn't go to university. So when it came to their children, their understanding of success was getting good grades, getting degrees. So it's only right that that's what they wanted for us as well. But, as humans, we need to change with the times and we need to adapt. And we're in a stage, like you've mentioned now, where having a degree doesn't define success anymore. It's more about what you do with your skill set and the opportunities you have.
I actually love the fact that you touched on that whole thing about kind of our parents' experience being different to our own. Because I think there's that element of extending grace and understanding that naturally people who want the best for you will give you advice based on their own life experiences. It doesn't mean they hate you. Not everyone who critiques you is a hater.
True.
But it does mean it takes a level of, audacity, self-confidence, and kind of knowing what you want for yourself and your life to be able to tell your parents or whoever it is respectfully, I love you, but I really need to pursue this path for myself and see how it goes. But then that's a whole thing within itself, kind of navigating disappointing people, not living up to people's expectations. But that could be another podcast episode.
I feel like if you do want to sort of step out of what's the norm, I think you just need to come with a bit of proof, a bit of evidence, whether it be, look, I've worked really hard on this. Here's my portfolio of all the art I've created or all the graphic design I've done for different websites. Or here's an example of someone's level I'm trying to get to, whether it's, a really successful YouTuber or someone who's in the web design world who didn't really go to school or get, a degree. I feel like if there's proof and if there's evidence and if there's an example of what you're trying to get to, it will be a lot easier to convince your parents or whoever you're trying to convince that this is a stable path that I can go down.
Yeah, and I guess even if it's not stable, kind of just having the freedom to kind of be like, hey, worst comes to worst, at least I tried. And it's important for me to know I tried rather than to live with regret. But yeah, it's not always the easiest thing to navigate.
I agree.
So if we now look at social media pressures, do you feel like you've ever caught yourself chasing a version of success that you didn't necessarily want?
Oh, that is a good question.
Yeah,
and I actually do have an example of where I did experience this. I think it was probably social media mixed with family pressures and a bit of my own pressure as well, actually. So when I was applying to medical school, I had this big dream. Of going to Cambridge University for medical school. And notoriously, Cambridge is known to be one of the best universities, not only in the country, but in the world. And I think my pride and my ego kind of wanted that for myself. And, as a high achiever from a very young age, I was like, there's no way I can't get in can't not get into Cambridge. So when it was an option, especially for medical school, I was like, you know what, I'm just going to apply. I never really looked into the course structure, the material, the way they teach. I was just like, I want Cambridge. So when I did apply and when I didn't get in, it really, really hurt my ego. And I think that's the thing that hurt the most. I felt like I had let myself down, my family down, my friends down, because everyone thought I was going to get in. So it did really hurt my ego. But then upon reflection, I realized that after looking at the course structure and after hearing from medical students at that university, that it wasn't my vibe. It really wasn't my vibe. And looking
like,
back,
what do you mean by it wasn't your vibe?
it wasn't my vibe in the sense that the teaching style was very essay focused. I hate essays. So if I had just done that simple research from step one, I would have realized that this isn't right for my way of learning.
You mentioned that if you had done your research initially, you probably wouldn't have pursued said path. Are you sure? Like, is there a part of you that's like, even if I knew this is not for me, I'm still going to go ahead and do it just because of the name, just because of the external validation?
Do you know what? You're right.
Don't be lying up. You're on the podcast now, Hazal.
Do you know why you're right? Even though I don't want to admit it, I think I probably still would have gone down that path just because of my relationship at the time with what success looks like and my relationship with sort of not wanting to let people down, which looking back, it did cause me to put a lot of pressure on myself again, even though getting into medical school in itself is a big achievement. I wanted the best of the best. And my understanding of what that was Cambridge Medical School.
And I guess you ended up at a place you didn't want to be at. You know, it wasn't necessarily your first choice. Like, how does one navigate being off track? If that makes sense. Off track is off track based on the plans that you made for yourself.
Something I've learned in my adult life is that a plan you made 2 years ago won't necessarily go ahead because plans change all the time and things change all the time. So you might feel off track based on a plan you had 2 years ago, but you might be on track based on a plan you had 3 months ago, right? So I think it's understanding that, especially as you become an adult and you step away from the sort of educational template you've been provided since the age of 3, and you go into this literally since the age of 3, you go into this working world and this adult world where things change all the time. Like you mentioned, like redundancies, you can be made redundant, and then your plan could have originally been to get a promotion in that job and become a manager, but now you don't have a job, let alone becoming a manager. So if you become at ease with the fact that your plans can change, you're less likely to feel like you're off track, which I know is so easy to say, because even now, looking into my future, I'm not exactly sure what it looks like. And that does make me feel uneasy, maybe not off track, but quite uneasy. But I think you need to get used to that uneasiness, because I think it just follows you throughout your adult life.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's also about just focus on the things you can control. I know it seems very like corny and stuff, but like Hazal said, like, things are going to happen that you don't necessarily want to happen, whether that's career, life, relationships, finances. And if you kind of view those things that have happened that have kind of pivoted or caused you to detour your original path as failures or as personal failures, it's just an unnecessary source of like attacking your own self-esteem. It's an unnecessary source of negative self-talk, especially when it's out of your control. So what you can do is kind of, start to look at, okay, I've detoured, or things have not worked out, or maybe a good thing happened that caused you to detour.
That's true.
And it's kind of like reassessing the situation. What do I do with this to ensure that I continue to walk a path that allows me to continue to pursue success, happiness, purpose in this new situation? That's why for me personally, I like to look at success as not something that's like arbitrary and can be measured with like a ruler and a pencil, but more so something that's a bit more fluid and varies with the time, the season, or the year that you may be in. There's long-term goals of success, but there's also short-term goals of success. And I think it's about keeping that in mind, because I think back in the day, I didn't comprehend that. I used to see success as graduating as a doctor. But it's like, okay, but what about all those exams you passed? What about, this pursuit you began that impacted so many people positively and gave you all these crazy opportunities? These small successes that you get on the way to the bigger goal are successes as well. I think it's okay to acknowledge the more arbitrary measures of success. I think it'd be pretentious and untrue if I was like, oh, I don't care about hitting 50K, or I don't care about getting a house, or I don't care about graduating as a doctor. Those are all amazing things that I completely acknowledge as being one of my most successful moments. But it doesn't take away from the fact that I still define success as me being able to pass my exams after resitting. You know, as me learning how to budget and getting my finances in order, despite not coming from a background where that's a norm. I acknowledge that as a success, and I'm proud of it. And I think my point is to view success beyond the arbitrary measures, and to also acknowledge that there's long-term and short-term success. Just because you have this amazing 10-year, 15-year, 20-year vision for yourself doesn't mean the little points that you meet along the journey should be disregarded. And even those points you meet along the journey, there will be a lot of detours, and all of those things deserve to be acknowledged despite them not being part of your original plan. So I do definitely still see success as something that's more fluid, but along that fluid journey, there will be arbitrary things that occur. I don't think it has to be either or.
The small milestones you achieve whilst working towards the big milestone are still things to celebrate, because you succeeded at them to get to the bigger success.
Definitely. And that's important, because detours will happen, like you said. Life will happen, and I guess it's about trying not to see those detours as failures, but as things that feed into your journey and make it this beautiful thing that's unique to you.
And I do want to touch on something we mentioned earlier, which is, if you feel on track, what do you do with that? Essentially
off track.
What do you do with that? And we touched on, you know, if you change your mindset from 2 yearly to 3 monthly, you're less likely to feel off track. But also another thing to touch on is, you could have a 3 monthly plan and still feel off track, right? And for those people, I would say it's okay. Like, it's actually okay. I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves in our 20s to have everything figured out, and to, you know, the classic finish uni at 21, married at 24, kids by 27.
Don't say that.
It's not happening, but it's okay. We have so many years ahead of us, right? So what's the point of getting everything ticked off in your 20s, and then you have your 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s to do what? Like, you can succeed beyond your 20s. You can have years of success beyond your 20s. So if you feel like you're slightly off track, or you're majorly off track, it's fine. In our university, there were people who started a degree at the age of 27. There were people who started a degree at the age of 31. That's not things we hear of, but these are things that happen in real life, and it's completely okay. So it's just, I guess, have grace, and just know that it's okay to not stick to that plan, and to pivot and do things a year or two later.
You don't have to hit your peak. You don't have to hit your peak at 20. Like, it's actually okay if your peak is
you probably don't want to hit your peak at 20.
No, I actually don't. Like, someone asked me that once, like, do you think you've hit your peak? And that question's haunted me ever since, because I'm like, wait, this is my peak. Like, what does the rest of my life look like? We think we want to hit our peak in our 20s, but if you actually think about it, if you've hit your peak in your 20s, that's a bit sad. You know, like, there's so much more of life, so much more to discover, so much more ways you can grow and discover new versions of success that I think is a bit sad to limit yourself to that extent. But sometimes we're just so close-minded, and we have all these external pressures from social media, from life and society, that it's your 20s or nothing.
And I think it's because, you know, high achiever syndrome. We want to get everything done as soon as possible. Becoming a manager or a CEO at
hitting 6 figures.
Hitting 6 figures at what, 24, 25? Like, guys, it can take us a bit more time, and it's okay.
Is high achiever syndrome an actual thing, or did you just make that up, by the way?
I made it up, and now I'm going to put a patent on it.
A patent is a patent.
Are you American? Patent.
It's definitely not patent, bro.
Patent. I'm British, and I say patent. If you had to strip it all back, what matters to you the most right now? Is it career progression? Is it financial freedom? Is it settling down and having 3 kids? Like, what matters to Lizzie the most right now?
I think for me, if I had to kind of summarize it, it would definitely be down to 4 Fs.
Go on. What are these 4 Fs?
I would say for me right now is definitely fulfillment, flexibility, freedom, and family. I feel like a lot of the time we chase the packaging when what we actually want is the feeling or the outcome we get from certain things. If we put the fancy, scary titles to the side, a lot of the time, what we want versus what we hope to gain by being there, a lot of the time we actually want the latter. So when we think about big, scary words like financial freedom, career progression, what I actually want is to have flexibility in my dream career or in whatever my career will look like in a few years' time. To have the flexibility to be able to explore all my different skill sets, do things that I enjoy without necessarily being overly restricted by a rota or a certain work schedule. You know, when I think about financial freedom, like just the word stresses me out. But really, I want the freedom and the luxury to be able to maybe travel, to be able to maybe bless my family with certain things, you know. And I think it's just about stripping away the packaging of these big scary words that we hear on social media and you know, we hear around us, and actually thinking about what am I hoping to gain by being there. So yeah, long answer short is about just reflecting on not the fancy title that I want to put on LinkedIn, but what am I hoping to gain by being in that position. As 20-something-year-olds, it's important for us to think like that. The thing that you want or you're going after, are there other pathways that you could acquire it through? Like, is there something else that you could do to acquire it in a way that is aligned with your authenticity, with your purpose, with your situation, and with what essentially makes you happy and honors the life you want and the version of success you believe in?
Okay, but what do you mean get success through different paths that align with you more?
Oh,
like, can you give me an example?
I feel like, for example, as a multifaceted individual who has multiple interests and there's different things I like to do, I think originally I wouldn't have defined it as my life right now. I probably would have thought that being multifaceted, you know, in my early years, I actually would have associated with people in the entertainment industry. Like, you know, actors who they can sing, they can dance, and they can act. Maybe I would have thought that being multifaceted looked like that in the creative space. Right. So perhaps at a young age, I could have, you know what, at a young age, I thought I wanted to be an actor because I enjoyed.
Goodness for that. You didn't.
I enjoyed how it looked so diverse. I didn't even realize that that's one of the things I enjoyed, but it just looked like such a diverse role. The type of actors I was looking at, like Zendaya. But then I think right now, as like a doctor who also happens to be a property investor, who also happens to be a content creator and a charity co-founder, I never thought that being multifaceted could look like this. But this is how it's most aligned to me. Tapping into business, tapping into medicine, tapping into entrepreneurship. It's all a bit of me. Quite authentic, you know, quite true to myself, my interests. So that's what I mean when I say you're chasing the feeling. The feeling I wanted was diversification and self-actualization of my different skill sets.
Definitely.
But it doesn't just look like one route. It looks like different ways. And that's important because what ends up happening is young people end up imitating versions of success they don't even want because it looks good and because they think that's the only way they can get that outcome. Hence why I say it's important to focus on the feeling and the outcome you actually want and not just the packaging of it, because the packaging of it may not be suitable for you and what you want in life. Do you get it now?
I get it.
Good example.
Yeah.
Did it land?
It landed very well. Safely and soundly.
I feel like this is one that our listeners might want to know. But how do you figure out what actually matters to you, especially when life is just so loud?
Life can get really loud. Yeah. That's a good question. Wow. Well, first and foremost, I don't think I figured it out all just yet.
Wow.
I think I'm continuously figuring it out. And I think with every new age and every new chapter in life, what matters to you most will change and pivot according to what mindset you're in and what just environment you're in. So I guess you will never always completely have it figured out, I think. But also for me, this is something that I find quite difficult, and how I sometimes pinpoint it is when my life is so hectic and when my life is so chaotic, what am I making the most time for? Like, what am I still making time for, even when I'm really struggling with finding time to do everything?
What
because
matters
what matters to me most. And it's not something that I think of prematurely. It's something that I literally plan as it's happening. For example, during university, which everyone can relate to, during exam season, you basically have time for nothing but to do exams and revision. But I would still make time to spend time with my family and friends because it mattered so much to me. I could hide myself away in a room and in a library for 3 months straight, but I needed that time with my family, my friends, because it really mattered to me. Another thing was content creation. We are a bit crazy for still creating content during exam season, but it's something we never wanted to give up, and we still made time for it even when we probably shouldn't have. So that's an example of how I determine what matters to me the most.
Practically, someone once told me, keep pulling the thread and see where you end up. And that was genuinely like one of the best life advices I've ever received. If you just keep making decisions, right? Exposing yourself to things, experiences you're getting yourself, things you're researching, content you're consuming. If you just keep leaning into things that align with what you like, you actually end up coming across things that unlock a certain part of your brain that starts to teach you things about yourself that you never necessarily knew before. I am where I am in life and have had the privilege of achieving certain successes because I always pulled the thread of things I liked. You know, I wanted to check out that networking event on Eventbrite. I wanted to follow said creator on LinkedIn, and I was able to learn this from them or get this opinion from them. I came across this article that tickled my fancy, and I was able to learn this from them that informed me that I should then go ahead and do this. Like, life is just one big web that connects you to, you know, your destiny essentially, but you need to make decisions that align with what you like and what you want. The only reason I know kind of the career I want to build for myself and the type of life I want to live is because I experienced certain things that made me realize, I value this. I don't like this. I enjoy this. I don't like that. And then you can start to wean out certain things from your life and start to wean out certain options from your life as well.
And I think that's so important, pulling the thread, because if you were to sort of bird's eye view of, like, I'd say both of our experiences from, like, I don't know, secondary school onwards, it is us continuously pulling that thread that has got us to where we are right now. And I think for people from our background, and many of you guys watching this as well, we're not necessarily going to have everything handed to us on a plate. And therefore we can't go from step A to step Z straight away. We need to go to B, C, D, E. We need to go through every single letter.
I'm not a nepo baby, I'm sorry.
And the only way you do that is by pulling the thread, is by going from A to B to C and seeing what you like, what you don't like, and that then sort of influencing your next decision. And then ultimately you'll get to Z, which is the ultimate goal, right? But through pulling that thread and through continuously doing that, we give ourselves the information and the experiences that weren't necessarily handed to us.
Facts. Figuring things out is an active process, hence why we said pulling the thread. We didn't just stand there with the thread in your hands, or hold on to the thread and let life just take you everywhere, every direction. You've got to pull it, right?
Don't you think it's wild that we're expected to stick to the same goals we had at 18, like 7 years ago? Why is it common to feel guilty for wanting to evolve?
Exactly. Like, you don't stay the same person at 18, 21, 25. We are still so young and generally do have so much time to make mistakes and figure it out. Those of us who have the privilege to be in those environments that permit us to do so. And I don't know, like, I don't know why we're made to feel guilty so much for evolving. I don't really know.
Let me have a think. I have an example, or I have an idea of why, you know, people who don't want the best for you might feel that way. Let's say you and your friend both at 18 had this goal, and you went on to then achieve your goal and then actually seek more from your goal and then start to evolve and want more and do more. Maybe your friend who just achieved their goal and were, you know, happy in their position and comfortable and didn't want to do more, maybe seeing you evolve is making them feel like they should do that too, because as humans we always compare, right? So maybe evolving is seen as a negative thing because it makes that person feel uncomfortable, because it makes them feel like, you know, you can never be comfortable and, you know, happy in your current position. You always need to be chasing more and more and more.
Wow, that's such a good point. And I guess to put it into words, essentially people view change as a negative thing. From a negative thing from the point of haters who just don't want to see you do well, and seeing you do well triggers them because they don't necessarily have the same desire, perhaps, or the same resilience to go out for what they want, perhaps. But also I think it can trigger a negative perspective on change, even from a good place. If I had maybe told my parents halfway through medical school that I'm going to drop out to pursue content creation, they probably wouldn't have reacted the most positive. And that doesn't mean they're a hater. It just means there's a lot of unknown. There's a lot of uncertainty. It goes against their perspective or their expectations of what they wanted from me. And also their perspective of a perfectly stable route that makes sense. So I think is that whole thing of people not always viewing change from the most positive lens. And on uncertainty can be very scary. I do think that there is that other element of people just being insecure, haters, as we'll call them, who are perhaps projecting onto you. Maybe they didn't have the audacity, the guts. Maybe they didn't have the guts to be unapologetically ambitious. So now that you're doing it, you're triggering them. You're making them reflect on their life decisions. And instead of them taking you as a source of inspiration, they now start to take you as a source of competition and could bring you down because of that. So there's various reasons why we're made to feel guilty for evolving externally. But I think there's internal reasons as well.
Like, we all like a bit of stability sometimes. Whether it's like financial stability.
I would love some stability in my life this year, actually.
Like, whether it's like stability financially, even like emotionally, constantly changing and constantly wanting more is obviously a good thing, but it can be quite draining. And sometimes you might just want to have 365 days to just chill, go work, come back, stay home, and like get home and not have to do something else. So I do understand it from that perspective as well. And I feel like when we look at it from more overarching theme or overarching topic, I feel like from a young age we're sort of school, education, whatnot, and then get a job, and then we never really taught anything about from getting a job to retirement. There's nothing really mentioned in that interim, which is like the largest chunk of your life, like 50, 60 years. Or wait, what age do we retire? I don't know. Anyway, like 40, 50 years, no one really mentions anything happening in that stage, right? You just go from getting a job to then making your money, whatever, to then retiring. So I feel like maybe even internally and as a society, we've internalized that we're just meant to have one career path and stick to it until we get us to retirement. And I guess that's how it was in the past. But times have changed a lot, and you can have so many more steps between that age of getting your first job to retiring. But I guess as a society and internally, we're still just getting used to that.
And just to what was it?
Hone in?
No, just to hop off the back of that.
Okay.
Is that the phrase?
Yeah.
Just to hop on the back of that?
I guess so.
I don't know, guys. English is not my first language. I feel like I've outgrown the understanding that a career is something that is one-dimensional. Like, obviously, as someone who's just entered their medical career, naturally, I'm going to be reflecting a lot about my career, what I want in the long run and stuff like that. And I used to see it as a very one-dimensional thing. You can only ever do this one thing. But I've now just come to the comprehension, thanks to people around me who've opened my perspective and experiences I've had and rooms I've put myself in, that a career can be very multi-dimensional. And it's not just okay, it's actually exciting, and it's something I'm actively seeking out.
There's so many more things we can do with our degree, which is so exciting, and it keeps us on our toes, so I completely agree with you.
If there was one thing that I want the ambitious girlies to take away from this podcast episode, what would it be?
Okay, dear ambitious girlies, I would say that honestly, understand that change is not a bad thing. It's okay to evolve. It's okay for your goals and your values to change with time. And that is a good thing. In fact, it's not a bad thing, and you shouldn't look at it like a negative.
Dear ambitious girlies, don't spend your life chasing a version of success that you don't even want. Don't do it.
And with that, thank you so much for listening to our first ever episode.
If you love this episode, be sure to share the link with a friend, your network, even the girls group chat. Also follow us on our social media at Lydia and Hazal on literally everything. And we'll be sure to see you in a new podcast episode very soon.
Bye.